I was out there waiting, on this particular coral finger, and I stopped and I looked around, and like there's just nothing out there. And I looked to my left, I saw some big bonefish. I looked ahead, I could see a little triggerfish tail pop up. And I looked to my right, and there was some, like, I think it was a barracuda or something like that. I'm just like, wow, this is literally the coolest thing ever, because it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Should I go left and, try for the bonefish? Should I walk straight ahead and try to, get the triggerfish? Or should I go right and just, catch whatever that was, barracuda or whatnot? It's just like, to me, it was just surreal. And then, like I said, you take a step back and you think where you're at. You're just like, holy cow. I'm sitting on this beautiful finger flat in the middle of nowhere, which is basically a pristine environment. It's untouched. The fishery's in great shape. There's bonefish to my left. There's a triggerfish in front of me. And there's other fish to my right. It was truly a surreal moment for me, just realizing, just kind of taking a step back. And at that point, honestly, I didn't even care if I was casting at that point. I was like, I just wanted to sit there and just kind of, I'm okay for a few minutes. I'm just going to soak this up because this is pretty cool. Hey guys, this is Kyle Gemas, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
That was my friend Kyle Gemas. He just got back from an amazing trip to the Seychelles. That's a place I want to go. I don't know if you guys know where the Seychelles are. You probably do. It's a dream trip for most fly fishermen, most fishermen, I guess. I don't know. Fly fishermen tend to really like it. It's just amazing. Lots of wading opportunities, lots of boat opportunities, lots and lots of different kinds of species that we don't really get a chance to fish for over here. Kyle told me he was prepping for this trip. I said, man, when you get back, I want to check it out. I want to do a podcast with you and find out all about it, because very few places these days give me wanderlust, but the Seychelles is one of them. Man, that's a place I'd like to go. I want to go in the worst way. And Kyle told me all about it, everything from what the trip was like to the travel, going through Dubai, spending some time with his wife over there, which is pretty cool. He was able to take a non-fishing companion, and she also had a great trip. And then they actually get there and go through the fishing. We talked about what the fishing was like, things that he should have brought, things that made the trip better, and just his overall experience. I thought it was awesome. Made me want to go. I'll tell you what, man, if you are thinking about a trip, get ready. This is a podcast you don't want to miss. Kyle Gemas, coming back from the Seychelles. Kyle, man, what's going on?
Tom, what's going on, brother?
I'm feeling good, doing great. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your trip. We've been communicating a little bit by email, but so you just went to the Seychelles, is that correct?
I did. I was definitely one of the lucky few who was able to get over there, and it was a fantastic time for sure.
So how long have you been planning this trip?
Well, it's probably been in the works. So we just got back about 2.5 weeks ago. So we went in April, and I think I booked it probably around January of the year before. So about almost a year and a half ago.
Yeah. And so what was it that made you pull the trigger on that particular trip? I mean, I've done a few extended trips. I guess the longest one that I've been a part of was Christmas Island, which is a long way out there, but the Seychelles is further and more involved and more expensive and more everything. So, like, what was it that made you pull the trigger on that particular trip?
Sure. Well, for me, I guess first off, I'm lucky and blessed enough to be able to travel, and fish. Most of my fishing, as you know, I'm a big fly guy, so that's pretty much all I do is saltwater fly fishing. And for me, that's pretty much always just been down in the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my fishing is really just down there, a couple spots in the Caribbean, Grand Cayman, whatnot. But really, pretty much all my fishing experiences to date have been solely in the Florida Keys, which is a phenomenal place to fish, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I've always kind of been curious, kind of what's outside the Keys, kind of what's outside the box that we live here in the U.S. And don't get me wrong, we have a phenomenal fishery, down in the Keys. We have phenomenal fishing in the U.S., But I've always been curious about, just kind of being immersed in this world of saltwater fly fishing that we live in, kind of seeing what else is out there. And, obviously there's things around here, Bahamas, Mexico. There would have been easier places to get to logistically and then probably financially too. But I just figured, if I was going to do it, I really wanted to do it right, and I was, again, lucky enough to have the time and the resources to commit to doing something big like the Seychelles, which for a lot of saltwater flyingers, I really think is kind of like the Mount Everest of kind of, where we want to go to fish. And then for me, part of the allure, I mean, obviously I went there to fish, right? But then for me, another part of the allure of going was just the adventure and, the logistics, just getting there.
Yeah,
So
well,
for me, it was
let's
probably
talk about that.
twofold.
Like, what does that look like to get there? Like,
Yeah,
where are you coming from, and then how long a trip is that?
yeah, for sure. So right now, I live in Dallas, Texas, which, I'm very lucky to be in Dallas, Texas, because it's a great place and a great launching point for a lot of trips. We have two major airports here, DFW and Dallas Love Field, and two major airlines, headquartered here, American and Southwest. So I can pretty much, I always brag, I tell people I can pretty much fly anywhere in the world, nonstop or direct, which is pretty cool. But logistically, it wasn't too bad. So what I ended up doing is I flew from Dallas directly to Dubai, which was about, a good 14, 15-hour flight. And then what was cool is in Dubai, I had about a 14 to 15-hour layover, which was neat because that allowed me an opportunity to kind of go out and explore and kind of see what Dubai was all about, which was really neat. And then from Dubai, I flew then down to the Seychelles. It's kind of like Hawaii in the sense that you fly basically into the main island, which is about a 4-hour flight from Dubai. And then from there, you take a smaller plane, a chartered kind of prop plane over to kind of the outer islands and atolls you'll be fishing at. So total, it was three different flights and about 20 hours of total flying and about 11,000 miles, but I made it in about 2 days.
Wow, that's awesome. What do you think about Dubai?
It was really interesting because obviously I really had never been, well, really out of the hemisphere, but especially, over the ocean or anything before. I've been to Canada, I've been to Mexico, I've been to parts of the Caribbean, but I've never been over the Atlantic, never been to Europe, nothing. So for me, it was really cool just to go somewhere completely different people, culture, just part of the world. Everything was new and kind of different and exciting. I was really looking forward to Dubai. When I got there, it was, I guess, as advertised in the sense that, I think you see a lot on TV or social media or whatnot. When you think Dubai, you think, obviously a lot of, kind of fancy things, cool buildings, money, car, all that. And that's all there for sure. But I guess the thing that surprised me the most about Dubai was one, just how incredibly clean the city was. It was spotlessly clean. Like I did not, I'm not even kidding. And I went around to, quite a lot of different parts of the city, but I'm not kidding when I say this. There is not one piece of litter on the street.
Hmm,
It
that's
was
cool.
it was immaculate. And then culturally, it was really cool too, because obviously, you're right there in the Middle East, which, for some people probably brings up a lot of different feelings one way or another. But Dubai is very cool because it's in the Middle East. It's very progressive for being in the Middle East. You kind of have a blend of a little bit of everything. There's a heavy Western influence. Everything is in either English or Arabic, so it's pretty conducive to people from the West traveling out there because it's not hard to figure out and get around, and they have Uber, and it's pretty cool. Like I said, parts of that town and city you would think you were somewhere in like California or LA. It's that Western. And then it's cool because there's also parts of town that are definitely more traditional and not Western. So you can kind of get a little bit of a mix of both depending on what you kind of want to do. So I really thought Dubai was really fantastic and really, really enjoyed getting the opportunity to spend some time there on both the front end and the back end.
They have a lot of. I've never been to Dubai, but I watched the film that Frank Smethurst did, where he was catching the queenfish right there. Right under the buildings of Dubai. There, apparently there's a pretty good queenfish population. They're kind of like Jack Crevalles of that part of the world. But those fish are fun. They jump. They eat all kinds of different flies and lures and everything. But they had a remarkable trip with the queenfish. I don't guess 14 hours offered you enough time to fish there, but that would that would be a lot of extra fishing on the trip like you just took.
It would definitely be something I want to do next time. I brought my wife with as a non-angling companion on this trip too, and we always kind of wanted to use those 14 hours to kind of do some, I guess, more land-based activities. But I know the queen fishing there is really awesome. And then, of course, when you're catching these things, with skyscrapers and yachts in the background, it's pretty cool too. So, didn't get a chance to do that this trip, but you can definitely put me down for that round two.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for the queenfish because I didn't really know what they were, but when I took my trip to Australia, which is that's kind of my big trip like you just took, like that's the one that when I think about it, it's definitely the biggest, most involved, most remote trip that I've ever taken was to this trip to the most northern part of Australia, the Bay of Carpentaria, and I was introduced to the queenfish there, and we were catching these fish, and they were just big, and I mean, I didn't know how big they were. I didn't know if they were baby queenfish but something about them kind of made me think, this just looks like a full grown fish. Like it does, like this, it's heavy bodied, everything about it kind of made me think that this is a big one, but I had never seen one before and I didn't really know what to expect. So we go back to the boat and I look at the world record book that they had in the boat. And sure enough, man, everything we were catching is really close to like world record size.
Wow.
And so I had never done this either. And we had certified boga grips and everything. And we went out and caught some world records. That was Dottie Ballantyne's introduction to world record fishing. And she went on she got the bug, went on to catching over 100 world records over the next probably 10 years. But that fish is really cool. It's a cool fish. It's kind of a mix, I think, between like a mackerel and a jack. And just aggressive and fun and cool. I think we caught them on every type of fly and lure you can, bottom to the top, top to the bottom. They eat all kinds of stuff. But anyway, they've got them there, and I'd like to go there too. It looks cool.
You definitely like it. Definitely, if you get the chance, make it happen.
Yeah. Did you eat there
In Dubai,
in
yeah,
Dubai?
absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah. So
What's the
it was
cuisine?
well, it's a little bit of everything, and that's kind of what I like about Dubai. Like I was telling you earlier, just kind of whatever you want to make it. I mean, you can go there and again, you'd feel like you're in America. You could have hot dogs, cheeseburgers, steaks. It's French fries. I mean, like I said, literally feel like you're in America. So on the front
Yeah.
end, we
Went all
kind
the
of
way
ate
to Dubai and got a Big Mac.
and got a Big Mac. That's it. So, on the front end of the trip, we kind of, I guess, spent more time kind of the western parts of town. So we had, our traditional American food. And then on the back end of the trip, on the way back to the States, after we got back from the Seychelles, we did, an Arabian safari. We went to some of the local marketplaces called souks. And then we had traditional Arabic food, which is really good. A lot of kind of kebabs, lamb, chicken, a lot of hummus, of course. Really good stuff. So we kind of had both ends of the trip. We kind of eased our way on the front end, with the Big Mac approach, like you said, and then on the back end went, completely local and traditional, which is pretty cool too. So we kind of got to experience both.
What'd your wife think about this trip?
She was, she's pretty cool. She's my adventure partner, and I told her, probably a couple years ago when I was really getting serious about, booking this trip. I said, I really want to do this. It's definitely kind of a Mount Everest thing for me. And obviously, I'm going there to fish. Would love to, have you come with, but obviously, you don't feel the need to come with. But if you did want to come with, where we're going, it's considered, conducive to bringing a non-angling companion. And she was all over it. Like I said, we love to travel together, and for her, I think the opportunity to travel, that far and experience new places and cultures really kind of resonated with her too. So she was just as stoked as I was, which was pretty cool. And, I was out fishing and she was out snorkeling and whatnot and just saw some amazing things. So it was kind of a win-win for both of us, and it was cool that we got to kind of experience Dubai and then just obviously the Seychelles together that way. So it was a neat experience for sure. And she was, like I said, just as fired up as I was, and kind of blown away with just the experience as a whole.
That's cool. So you go to Dubai, and so far it's kind of a conventional type trip. You got on a commercial airline, and then to get to the fishing location. Once you're finished with Dubai and you kind of pack up your stuff and you're like, okay, now we're headed someplace. Well, I mean, it seems pretty remote by looking at the map, but I don't know. So what does it look like from the Dubai to actually getting to the fishing location?
Sure, sure. So after Dubai, we had one more, I guess, commercial flight. So we flew commercially from Dubai right to Mahe, which is the capital, Victoria City, kind of the capital of the Seychelles. Now, the Seychelles themselves, I kind of compare them to Hawaii in the sense that it's a chain of islands. Some are more inhabited and populated than others, and similar type of topography and landscape too. Very hot, humid, tropical, lush. But the country as a whole, I think if I remember correctly, it's only like a population of about 300,000 people. So it's pretty. There's not a whole lot out there. You're about 1,000 miles east southeast of Somalia, basically off the coast of Africa. So commercially, like I said, we flew from Dubai into the main island. And then at that point in time, we had a few hours, and then we went to a different part of the airport. And there you hop on a charter flight through the outfitter and lodge they kind of put together. It's a little prop plane. It seats about, probably 16 to 18 people. And then you fly about another hour. It's about 300 miles southwest of the main island. And it's very remote. I mean, you're totally, totally off the grid. And I think for me, at least, kind of stepping on that charter kind of prop plane is kind of when I realized, like, man, this is out there. I mean, it was neat, very remote. And then once you got to the island, even more remote. I mean, and you couldn't even try to. You go on Google Earth, a map, and it's just a speck. You can't even see it. It's you just assume there's land there. It's somewhere out in the water. I mean, it is uber remote, uber off the grid. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely out there.
Wow. And so what lodge or outfit did you go with?
Yeah, so in the Seychelles, the outer islands, there's two outfitters. There's an outfit called Fly Castaway. They have two programs. They have an atoll called Farquhar, and they also have a liveaboard operation called Providence. And then the other outfitter out there is called the Alphonse Fishing Company. They have four different islands right now: Alphonse Island, Cosmolito, Astov, and Poivre. And each kind of island and atoll is kind of unique. The fishery is a little bit different in each one. But so we booked, our outfitter was Alphonse Fishing Company, and then we stayed at their Alphonse Island kind of lodge and outpost, and that's where we spent the week. And one of the reasons, like I said, why I kind of gravitated towards that was awesome fishery, incredible variety of things to fish for, and then very nice accommodations for as remote as you are. I mean, like I said, we definitely lived right for as remote as we were. And then obviously the non-angling component for my wife, it was very conducive, things for her to do. They had a pool there, which is cool. She could snorkel, she could dive, she could walk around, hang out on the beach. There's plenty of things for non-angling folks to do. And then for me, the angling part was just, was top notch. So it was kind of a win-win for both of us. And like I said, there's no cell phone, there's no Wi-Fi, well, no Wi-Fi, no TV. You had enough kind of Wi-Fi at the kind of bar area to maybe send a text message, but I mean, you're pretty much disconnected from the world for a week. So it was out there. But like I said, for the week though, we did live, quite comfortably. The food was very good. They have these little bungalows you kind of stay at with little air conditioning, so we weren't dying because it's pretty hot. You're basically just below the equator, and it's incredibly hot and humid. I've been to Florida quite a bit, and July and August, and I thought that was hot and humid. But this definitely gave me a new appreciation of what hot and humid truly means. So
What did
I
you
think
think about what did you think about the sun strength?
oh man, just brutal. I'm always a big proponent of, pants and long sleeves and, getting the old buff for the face, but it was incredibly potent. I mean, it was you'd want to cover as much skin as possible. I mean, you it doesn't take much because like I said, you're basically right on the equator and it'll light you up for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've been kind of at that latitude before, and it's surprising. Like, you're in Key West or whatever, you think, well, I work out in the sun basically every day, and it's, I'm pretty well used to this. But man, you go down there and you get hammered. Same thing was us with Australia. I found that the sun was way stronger. And like my son, you know how when you wear the buff and there's like this little ring between the shirt and your buff sometimes,
Oh
like a
yeah,
little like about a quarter inch, maybe a half inch on some people.
sure.
Man, my son got so sunburned right there on that one. He should have had that other buff thing that kind of capes out at the bottom. Those things
Yeah,
are
sure.
really good. You can tuck those into your shirt for that kind of trip. That's the way to go. But anyway, he started wearing two buffs. He would like wear one, and then that wasn't even enough, and he started safety pinning the buff to his t-shirt so that there was no chance that it would ride up because I mean, day one, he just got worked, man. But that's always, a danger when you're going to those type of locations. You just don't realize how strong the sun is there. It's incredible.
Well, and then another thing too, Tom, real quick, which is kind of interesting. The water set up there, it was all just desalinated salt water. So you would drink water, and sometimes it was almost like you were having a hard time kind of quenching your thirst because the water was completely desalinated. There was no, electrolytes or minerals or nutrients in it. So it was kind of a double whammy effect. And they recommended you kind of bring these little electrolyte tablets with to kind of put in your water bottles or whatnot, just to kind of give you a boost because the water itself, with the desalination, some people were having some harder time staying hydrated just because you're not quite used to that, so you kinda had a double whammy there, which was pretty interesting.
Well, you could probably, I mean, if survival, you could take some of the salt off that evaporates on the boat and even just lick that for a while.
Sure, sure.
Something. You have to have salt. And when they pull everything out of that water, that's like drinking the distilled water. And that's not good. You'll end up getting in bad shape. So when you saw people getting in bad shape like that, what was happening to them? They were just what would they just get real tired or what?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you'd be out there because the fishing program is pretty similar to here, kinda like an 8 to 4 kinda deal, and, usually, like I said, around, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, after you've been out there for 4 or 5 hours, people were definitely, slowing down quite a bit or, just had to, kinda take a break for 5, 10 minutes, just kinda regather themselves and kinda refocus. So, it's a real thing. I mean, you saw, like I said, the negative effects of kinda just the hydration component, maybe the water and just not maybe properly hydrating because, like you said, I mean, it's really, really hot. And then usually, like I said, it was like clockwork, last couple hours of the fishing day, you kind of see who, was hydrated and who wasn't, or who was need a little bit, extra kick. So just kind of slowing down, a little bit lethargic, maybe not as focused. And it was a real thing for sure.
Wow, that's cool. So when it comes to the fishing, there are a lot of species there, some of which you're probably familiar with, some you weren't, some were similar to other species. What all was available to you?
Yeah, so we had some things that we'd see here in the US, the bone fishing. I know you like to bone fish, I do too. The bone
Mhm.
fishing was, I would describe it as stupid. I mean, I've never seen so many bonefish in my life, just clouds of fish, clouds of fish. So the bone fishing was phenomenal. I would challenge anywhere in the world to find a better bone fishery as far as quantity goes. So the bone fishing was off the chart. Then, of course, the real attraction for me is, and probably most anglers from the West too, would be the opportunity to fish for stuff that we don't have here in the U.S. So you talked earlier about kind of the Jack Crevalle. Well, we got his big brother, the giant trevally, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
We got the bluefin trevally. which is pretty cool. Beautiful fish. You have two or three different kinds of triggerfish, which are really kind of pretty, kind of interesting, goofy looking fish. You have Indo-Pacific permit. I know you're a big permit guy, so that you have milkfish. You have many different things that you can't, or that you just wouldn't have the opportunity to cast to, here in the West. So you had a couple things you'd seen, bonefish, whatnot, barracuda, things like that. But then you had this whole other kind of side of the coin that was things that, you only see in pictures. And to me, just the variety and the opportunity, that's kind of what really attracted me to the Seychelles.
So when you first go there, like, did you have a strategy like I want to go for these fish that I've never caught first, or like do you have to just immerse yourself into that sick bone fishing first? What did you do? What did you
Yeah,
do? I
so
don't know. I would be like, yeah, let's go out and bend the rod today. Let's go catch like 1,000 bonefish, and then I'll move on after
yeah,
that.
no, exactly, exactly, and that's kind of how it is for me. I'm just there to really just have fun and have the rod bent as much as possible, and then obviously you let the conditions and the tides kind of dictate. So what was cool about the week I went is you had the first part of the week was neap tide. Okay, so that's real conducive to a lot of good bone fishing and trigger fishing, and then the last part of the trip, more of a spring tide, more water was pushing out of the flats, which really get, kind of the GTs, giant trevallies, and the bluefins kind of excited, and the milkfish too. So it was kind of fun to kind of experience kind of both ends of that spectrum. And for me, it was really just, what's the tide doing? Conditions will dictate. And that's kind of how I attacked it. So based off the water levels, water movement, that's kind of how we would structure and set up our fishing days. And it was fun because, that way we got to do a little bit of everything and just great variety.
Yeah, that sounds cool. And of all the great variety, did you end up fishing for the milkfish?
It's interesting. A lot of the milk fishing they do is outside the flats, but on the flats, they do swim quite a bit. So it wasn't a species that we would exclusively target, for a couple hours or for a tide movement on the flats, but you'd see them. We'd be out GT fishing or permit fishing, and you would see these milkfish swimming. It's cool because they look like, just massive, massive bonefish, on crack. They're all
Mhm.
over the place, and it's cool because you can see them coming. And what's neat about the guides out there, the milkfish itself, it just eats, plankton and algae. It's not going to eat, any kind of fish or bait fish or crab or anything like that. And they actually,
Mhm.
the guides out there over time, they made a couple specific milkfish flies, which just like look like little, green puffs, to imitate the algae. And you kind of throw it out there and just kind of let it float and hope the fish kind of, sips it up or happens to see it. So for me, never spent time exclusively fishing for milkfish. But that said, if you see one coming or a group coming on the flats, I don't care what the fly is, I'm putting a shot out there,
Yeah.
so it doesn't
Yeah, I know.
matter. So I would do that, and I didn't have any luck, but you definitely saw them, and I think, like I said, you could definitely catch them with the old algae fly I had in my bag too.
Yeah. It's funny, the first time I went to Christmas Island, they didn't fish for them at all. They also didn't fish for the triggerfish. They just you would look over there and they'd be like, "Something's tailing over there. Oh, it's a triggerfish," and just move on. And you would just go and catch more bonefish or more trevally. And then I went back to the Christmas Island almost 20 years later, 15 years later, I guess, somewhere between 15 and 20 years later. And they were very sophisticated in their triggerfish fishing and had flies for them and different techniques. And there were anglers there that had come specifically for the triggerfish. That's just what they were going to do all day. I just thought it was interesting how that had changed. They also did that on the milkfish. And I do know that the flies have been getting better over there in the Seychelles, and people have really been targeting those milkfish. I've had an opportunity to hook those things a couple times, and man, I mean, tarpon are cool. That milkfish is, I'm gonna say, I think that it may be the most powerful fish I've ever hooked. Sailfish, wahoo, tarpon, permit, any of them. I mean, that thing is incredible. and if you see a picture of it, it almost looks like a fake photoshopped picture when somebody's holding one up, because it looks like some kind of a mullet with a ladyfish with a tail that's about 5 times too big for it. And they just, man, those things are so powerful. I would love to go someplace where you could really target those, like, more so. It sounds like that could be a good place. But they do it, I've seen a couple of different movies and films and stuff like that where they fish for them, and they'll get pooled up or schooled up in these areas like you're talking about, like off the flats, and there's some sort of current, and you kind of drift one of these algae flies through there, and maybe it's like salmon fishing, maybe you're just flossing them. I don't know what happens, but they do hook them and they do catch them. But man, my experience with those things is when you hook them, you better watch out, man. They are taking off like nothing I had ever hooked before. It was crazy. So what about the permit? Did you fish for those?
We had the permit rod out a few times for sure. Yeah, kind of the triggerfish rod and the permit rod was similar. A lot of kind of crab flies. So what was cool is I did spend some time permit fishing. I wouldn't say where I was at, Alphonse is probably a great permit fishery, but you definitely see fish. We probably spent probably about maybe like 30 minutes to an hour kind of each day, maybe dedicated to permit exclusively. And you see them, it's no different than permit fishing in the Keys, as you know. I mean, it's, permit or permit. So, you sometimes you make the cast and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think I had probably about 3 quality shots at permit, and I didn't connect any time, of course, as you know, it's a tough fish. But, the permit fishing was there, and it was definitely part of the menu per se of fishing options.
Mhm. And what about, like, fish like the queenfish? Are those around?
They are. They're in better numbers on some of the other atolls and islands they fish. You don't see a whole lot on Alphonse where I was at, but I think I saw probably 2 or 3, throughout the week. They're there just in much, much limited numbers.
Mhm. Now, when you were first explaining, like, the outfit that you went to, you were saying Alphonse Fishing Company, right? That's the one
Yep,
that you went
yep.
with? And then they had, several places that they could go. Cosmoleto, which I've heard of. I had another friend, Fletcher White, he went there a long, long time ago and spoke very highly of it. Did you go to any of these other places, or are you staying kind of in that Alphonse area?
I stayed just in the Alphonse area,
Now,
which was cool.
were there opportunities to go there, or like if you were to book the trip and like you wanted to go to those places, would that be possible? Or like I've not looked into this trip enough to know like if
Sure.
that's something that you can do on, see several different places, or if you just kind of decide on one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I guess to answer your question, the answer is yes. So the way their structure and program works is all of their fisheries, that because like I said, they have 4, Alphonse, Astove, Cosmelito, and Poivre. They're all basically a week-long trip. So wherever you choose to go, that's where you're fishing for a week. So if you wanted to fish the other islands, you could. You just have to stay another week. And so for example, I bumped into some people who they fished Alphonse for the week, and then the following week, they're going to go to Cosmelito, or the following week they're going to go to Astove. So that opportunity is there. I guess, like I said, it would just be they don't do any kind of like 2 days in Cosmo, 2 days at Astove. It doesn't quite work that way. It's all just you commit to the week program per atoll, and then if you want to stay, you can. It's just you got to wait another week.
So geographically, how far away are these places from one another?
So, like I said, you got the main island of the Seychelles. Alphonse is about 300 kilometers away. I know we're in the U.S., so yeah, I can't do the conversion for you, but that's what they said.
Well, that's a
um,
long way.
yeah, I just know it's a long way. Put it that way.
Yeah.
And then from Alphonse, Cosmelito and Astov are about another 300 to 400 kilometers west.
Okay. So, I
So
mean, you're not
way
talking
out
about
there.
like the difference between fishing Key West and the Marquesas, or
Right,
Key West and
right.
Islamorada. I mean, there's significant spans between these two. So that makes a
It's
lot
a
more
pretty
sense
big gap. Yeah, yeah.
why you would have to pick. and choose. And I guess you fly between the two places. Like if you do that, you're gonna get on another one of those charter flights.
Correct, yeah, so you would, the way it works is they have a couple flights a week, so you'd fly from the main island like I did to Alphonse like I did, and then basically that plane would continue on to Astov because they have an airport with a landing strip there. Airport, not an airport, they have a landing strip there. And, you land there, and if you're fishing Astov, you just, you get off and you're good there. But if you're going to Cosmolito, then you would have to take a boat from Astov to Cosmolito, which isn't too terribly far, but it'd be a few hours for sure. So Cosmolito would definitely be the one of the harder ones to get to as far as just extra,
Wow.
logistics.
And so, what about the guides that you're fishing with? I mean, a while back, Yeti had a film about one of the guides there, kind of an interesting fellow. What nationality are these guides? What age group? Like, what are the guides like?
Yeah, I mean the guides they're top notch, very very professional, very good at what they do. The vast majority are going to be from South Africa. Very heavy South African influence. I'd say of the guide pool, I'd say probably at least 75% are from South Africa. Beyond that, there's a few Americans over there too, which is fun. So we got to fish with a couple of the American guides over there. And then beyond that, I guess would be just kind of, random places. There's a couple guys from, Zimbabwe or Botswana, or there's one guy from, somewhere in Europe that, or whatnot. So like I said, vast majority South African, and then a couple Americans, then a couple other folks who are, from Europe, or there's one or two folks even who are Seychelles, which is, so they're from the Seychelles, which is kind of cool too. Real top notch. I mean, they know what they're doing, and they're pretty dialed, and they're all good guys, and enjoyed fishing with everybody. Because the way it works is you get 6 fishing days, and each day, I mean, unless you really want to just fish with one guy, but they kind of rotate you amongst the guides, which is kind of fun because it kind of allows you to, just meet and fish with other people, maybe see different parts of the lagoon or the flats. So it's really neat, just the opportunity to fish with, different people throughout the week.
Yeah. So I wonder how an American ends up in the Seychelles guiding. Did you fish with some of those guys and get their stories?
I did, it's pretty cool. The Alphonse Fishing Company, the opportunity to guide out there, it's very competitive. They're pretty choosy about, who they kind of hire as guides. I think that Jeff, one of the American guides I fished with, was telling me that, on average, they get something like 2,000 applications a year, to fill, whatever 20, 30 guides positions. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So they can really pick and hand pick, some of the best. And it's like anything, it helps if you have a connection, or if you know somebody maybe within the industry, or someone who can, kind of help, sweeten the pot a little bit with your, resume. So in Jeff's particular instance, he fished in Alaska, he guides in Alaska quite a bit. And he had, a sponsorship deal, I think with Cortland Line. And then he was kind of able to use that. One of his, people there kind of knew one of the fishing managers at Alphonse. They'd kind of talked before. And when they had an opening come up, he was kind of in a good spot to kind of, be ready to pounce on that opportunity. So that's how a lot of those guys get there. It's obviously you got to be good, but then it helps if you can, maybe have a connection in the industry, or
Yeah,
maybe help know someone to kind of help give you a little extra boost.
that's man, you're giving me wanderlust right now of wanting to go, and then also wanting to say, man, I wonder if anybody would miss me for like 8 months, where if I just took off and tried to get a job in the Seychelles. That just seems so cool. That seems so awesome. Maybe my wife wouldn't miss me for 3, 4 months.
Well, you've been
Maybe I could
married
get
long
away
enough,
with it.
Tom. I think you might be in the clear.
Yeah, well, I've been married long enough, and we're about to be empty nesters.
That's what I'm saying, man. So you
There
got some
may
time.
be, yeah. Well, I got 3 kids. Two of them are already at college, and one of them is getting closer and closer. So you never know. You never
Sure.
know. But I'll keep that in mind. I'm sure I could bring some people over there that would wanna fish, and that would be, I don't know, that would just be so cool. I think, as somebody, who's guided in other places, you would just think that's gotta be like one of the places that, it would have to be top of the list, I think, of places where you could go and probably get in some real exploring, and there's some real opportunity there, I think, for innovation and coming up with some new tactics or bringing some tactics from the Keys over there, and kind of, not that those guys haven't seen it, but I think that if you took a Florida Keys guide and put them over there for a couple months, I think some pretty special stuff would start happening with those milkfish or the triggerfish or the permit.
Oh, yeah.
That seems really cool.
And I'll tell you too, Tom, real quick, what's interesting is most of the fishing, well, not, I shouldn't say, it's about 50-50 the way they fish. It's about 50 percent of your time is going to be spent actually on a traditional poling skiff like the Keys, and the other 50% is going to be wading around. So I know you know how to pole a skiff. So like I said, I think there is something to that. I really
Yeah,
do.
but the thing about, like, my experience with Christmas Island, and one of the reasons why I liked that so much is because you could get out and you could wade these just expansive and basically never-ending flats. Like, you could find a never-ending incoming tide in Christmas Island,
Sure.
which is really something that I had never experienced before when I was there. I mean, I've gone to the Jolters at the top of Andros, and they have these huge, giant, massive white flats up there. But, the tide comes in and it gets to be high on the entire flat. In the inside of Christmas Island Lagoon, there are places where you just continue to you get in ankle deep water, and you can tell that the tide's coming up. And if you just kind of keep walking a little bit to the right or to the left, whichever way it is that the tide's coming in, you just stay in that ankle deep water for hours and hours and hours. And you can look at these maps and you're like, "Oh, I see what was going on there." We kept going further and further back into this bay area, and we were able to stay in the same depth of water, and we were following this wave of fish that was coming up onto the flat. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever experienced in my whole fishing career. I would imagine that you're seeing similar type things there, just waiting like for all day. And for a guy that fishes out of the boat most of the time, that is refreshing and awesome. I love, love, love that.
It was neat, and because I'm the same way, like I was telling you earlier, in the sense that, pretty much all my fishing's in the Keys, which is going to be from the skiff, which is great. But it is cool for me to get the opportunity to, go wade some just amazing flats. And like you said, I mean, here you can only imagine, similar to Christmas Island, just really, really awesome. And like I said, if you just wanted to walk around all day, then you could easily do that. It was really neat. So I enjoyed that as well, just getting able to stretch the legs out a bit, because that's definitely more of a new experience for me too, and
Yeah.
definitely one of my
And
favorite things to
when you
do.
do that kind of fishing, like Christmas Island has some specific gear that you need. I mean, if you go there with certain type of wading boots, they're going to get shredded. If you go there with other types, you're going to be in good shape. What did you think about the wading there and the foot gear? Would you change what you took or not, or were you happy with what you had?
I was happy with what I had. I've had some good little wading boots. I think they're Sims boots. I've had those for a couple years now for parts of my, jaunts to the Caribbean or whatnot. So I brought those with, and they were, thick rubber, hard soled, not like the neoprene stuff, like actual thick,
Mhm.
hard rubber. And that's definitely what you want. I mean, there's a lot of coral out there. You definitely want gravel guards. I brought that too, and that's a real thing. You'll get chafed out of your mind without those. So footwear, I was pretty happy with what I had, and it held up great, during the week, because I mean, there's opportunities where, sometimes if you're just, walking a nice sandy bonefish flat, you can just kick the boots off and go barefoot, which is what I love to do the most.
Mhm.
But,
Mhm.
on some of these other, they're called finger flats, where there's a lot of coral and, rubble and just thick, kind of seaweed or, grass, whatnot. You definitely want to have boots. One, just because the coral is really sharp, and then just the sand, the gravel, you don't want that chafing your feet. And then there's also some little critters, that live within the seagrasses that can definitely sting, and strike your foot. You definitely would not want to be that remote having to deal with, a cone snail strike, for example. So
Cone
you d
snail, that's interesting. I don't know what that is, but I was thinking a mantis shrimp could open you up pretty good.
you see
What's a
those
cone
too.
snail?
Yeah, you see those too. But what I always worry about is, I guess, what you can't see in the seagrass. So, and because you're definitely, stepping into it, so it helps having a good pair of boots with you for
What
sure.
is a cone snail?
It's a snail, lives in a shell, right? Snail, duh. And it's unique and native only to the Indian Ocean. And it packs a pretty nasty bite or sting, whatever you want to call it, that, if not in certain people actually can be fatal. It's pretty
Damn.
nasty. I mean, I would,
Do you have to be walking really, really slow to get bit by a snail?
oh yeah, yeah, you'd be okay. I mean, the chances of it happening are 1 in a million, but like I said, you always got to think about the million. So you definitely want the proper kind of, foot gear, which definitely helps for sure.
Yeah. Well, when we went to Christmas Island the first time, the wading boot technology was not very good, and we all had the zip up, side zip,
Sure.
little traditional flats shoes. And I mean, one day you would just those things were shredded. So we were told, take 2 or 3 pairs of these things. So when we went back the second time, I was like, even though like Sims makes some good ones, there's quite a few different kind of flats boots like out now that are a little more like a high top tennis shoe. But I
Sure.
even looked at those and I was like, I'm gonna go with these boots. Like I went with like how you have like hiking boots and that then you have like lightweight hikers that are kind of have like cordura instead of just full on leather. They have
Oh
kind of
yeah.
cordura between the leather. And I went with like a fast drying kind of speed hiker, like it had a hiking boot sole
Okay.
and it had, partial leather sides, and I got those for me and my boys, and those were great. I mean, they lasted the whole time, and then we drilled some holes in the side to where the water would leak out, and then
There you go.
use the gravel guards. But man, that's something that a lot of people don't think about on those wading trips. Like you're going to be walking all day long,
Sure.
and you're just going to go out there in some flat soled little wimpy little wading boot, and for some people, I mean, you're gonna be walking like 7 or 8 miles
Oh,
in
absolutely.
some of these locations. I don't know about the where you were, but in Christmas Island, you could easily walk that far if you wanted to. You don't have to. You could walk 200 yards if you want, but sometimes your guide says, "Well, do you wanna go back to the boat?" And you kinda get this excitement of, "Well, there's fish tailing as far as I can see. No, I don't wanna go back to the boat." And he's like,
Right.
"Okay, well, I'll
Right.
tell the boat to go around and pick us up." Okay, so
Hmm.
the boat goes around, and now you look down there, and 2 miles away, you see the boat. You're like, "Oh, okay. I'm walking 2 miles." I didn't understand that, which, if you're young and fit and in good shape, that's fantastic. Like, put the
Sure.
boat 5 miles down there, but for some people that don't walk a lot, now you gotta walk for 2 miles, and you're doing it in some shoes that you've never worn before, and there's sand in there, and I saw some people get some pretty nasty blisters going through that like that. So, if you're going on one of those trips, break your boots in and make sure that you spend some time breaking them in because you're gonna wear them a lot. So, what about anything else? Like, were you happy with all the stuff that you took on that trip, or did you think that, if I ever went back, I would do something different?
Yeah, no, I mean, gear-wise, I was pretty good. I brought an 8, a 9, and a 12. 8 was mainly just for bonefish, 9 kinda permit, milkfish, triggerfish rod, and then 12 was, just GT rod and, bluefin trevally. So gear-wise, I was really happy with that. I mean, I used all my rods. I brought with some flies, and then they actually had a little kinda fly shop thing on the island too, all just local patterns tied by the guide. So I always try to, obviously use what they recommend because they're out there, they know it works. And of course, a lot of these flies that have been tailored to, specifically for GTs or triggerfish or milkfish or whatnot, things that you couldn't find just, here in the States, as easily unless you tied it yourself. So gear wise, I was really happy with that, and then I brought a bunch of just, tippet, leader material, whatnot. And my reels, and pliers, backpack. I mean, I tried to bring less because I'm a big person. To me, less is more, but at the same time, for as remote as you are, you want to make sure you kind of have your bases covered. So it's kind of this balance of trying to be lean and mean, but also, making sure that everything was kind of in check per se. But yeah, I was really happy with the rod choices. That to me was perfect. Like I said, I used every rod. The boots were great. That's definitely a key piece of gear. And then the flies, I mean, some of the bonefish patterns, clousers, whatnot. I mean, bonefish are bonefish. They're going to eat, clouser just about anywhere. So you can bring stuff like that, I would recommend. But then definitely for some of the local, species like a milkfish, a GT, triggerfish, it helped having, the flies kind of on site there that I could choose from and kind of supplement in there too.
That's good to know that they have that, because a lot of places don't. You got to not only bring the flies that you're going to use, but then some fly tying supplies and hooks and stuff like that, which I usually bring that stuff on a trip like that, and then just leave it with the guides
Yeah, exactly.
after. And they appreciate some of the fly tying materials more so than they would appreciate finished flies, because now they can mess around and try some stuff. And some of them do, some of them don't tie. But what about the GT? Did you catch some of those?
I did not. I caught bluefin, but I never quite came tight to a GT.
Did you see them?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, they're there. The coolest thing I had, I think, was, it's kind of like sometimes they'll be in like little packs or one or two fish, but to me the coolest thing is when there's singles, just big singles, kind of roaming the flats. And there's one particular instance which is still one of, I think, the highlights of the trip, which is funny because I didn't end up catching the fish. So people say, well, how could it be cool? But for me, I was up on, we were poling, it was about 3, 4 feet deep water. The tide water was rushing in, sun was out, great viz. And you could see kind of like a tarpon, this guy had a big old kind of black back, so you could see him coming and, he threw the cast out there and then you just strip like hell, man, just go crazy. There's no such thing as stripping too slow for a big GT, that's what they want, long, fast strips is how you do it. And big old guy, he comes up and he starts tracking in and he just about, but he never, never came up. But just the feeling of that, you talk about having your heart in your mouth. I mean, you're just like, wow, that's about as visually, visual overload as it gets. And it was pretty cool. Alphonse, where I was at, it's a decent GT fishery. I would say probably Cosmolita or Astov are much better. So if you have your heart set on a GT, I would probably go to one of those islands. But for me, the opportunity, just the smorgasbord of all the variety, and the GTs are there. And like I said, you still get, 2 to 3, 4 or 5 shots a day, which is perfect. So it was fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I love to hear the highlights. Like if you were to just think back on it, it doesn't have to be a fish catch. I mean, some of the most incredible experiences I've had are just being someplace and just realizing, oh, man, I am out here in the middle of nowhere. Like this is amazing. Like it may be a lifetime experience. What would you say, did you have an experience like that on this trip to where it was like surreal. You just couldn't believe that you were doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that came earlier in the trip, kind of with those neap tides, spent a lot of time when they're called finger flats, which are basically, these kind of, flats that are kind of elevated and they're all coral based. And there's a lot of cool, kind of exotic looking seagrasses, orange, kind of green, And I remember I was out there waiting, on this particular coral finger. And I stopped and I looked around and like there's just nothing out there. And I looked to my left, I saw some big bonefish. I looked ahead, I could see a little triggerfish tail pop up. And I looked to my right and there was some, like, I think it was a barracuda or something like that. I'm just like, wow, this is literally the coolest thing ever, because it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Should I go left and, try for the bonefish? Should I walk straight ahead and try to, get the triggerfish, or should I go right and just, catch whatever that was, barracuda or whatnot? It's just like, to me, it was just surreal. And then, like I said, you take a step back and you think where you're at. You're just like, holy cow, I'm sitting on this beautiful finger flat in the middle of nowhere, which is basically a pristine environment. It's untouched. The fishery's in great shape. There's bonefish to my left. There's a triggerfish in front of me. and there's other fish to my right, just like, it was truly a surreal moment for me, just realizing, just kind of taking a step back. And at that point, honestly, I didn't even care if I was casting at that point. I was like, I just wanted to sit there and just kind of, I'm okay for a few minutes. I'm just gonna soak this up because this is pretty cool.
Yeah, that to me, those experiences, all the fish that you catch, and I'm sure there's some ones that'll stand out. But to me, when I do a trip like that, it is those moments to where you're not fishing, you're not, maybe you've just landed a fish, but it's this just short moment of reflection of just like, geez, look where I am. Like this is just unreal. And you can have that in the Florida Keys. You can have that on a freshwater stream in Montana, but
Sure.
it's just this short moment of reflection of just taking time. And I think as I get older, I have more of those moments than when I'm younger and just going hard at it, and you rarely take the time to step back and look unless the situation is just so completely unreal that like seeing the Grand Tetons for the first time in your life, or something where it is just undeniable. You just cannot believe what you're seeing. Otherwise, you're just staring at the dry fly or staring at the strike indicator, or chasing down a tailing bonefish or whatever. And maybe as a young man, you don't look at kind of where you are as much. But as I get older, man, those moments, those are what the trip is made of for me. I don't know if you feel the same. Maybe you will in a few years. You're a little bit younger than me, but that's cool, man. This sounds like a really awesome trip. One of the things that I think is interesting and why I wanted to do this podcast with you is because I've been able to kind of watch your fishing career, your ability to do these trips, and you kind of progress as an angler since I guess we first met at one of the saltwater experience weekends at Hawks Cay.
Yeah.
Is that
2012,
right?
2013, somewhere in there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So between 2012 and now, you've really come a long way in your angling, and I'd like for you to kind of walk us through what that looked like for you.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I didn't really grow up in a super outdoorsy family, a lot of sports, which was totally fun too. My grandpa got me into, just regular spin fishing. I grew up in Wisconsin, fishing for a lot of perch, bluegill, things like that, at a young age. So I always kind of had it there. And then, middle school, high school, you kind of get away from that and get in sports mode and whatnot. And what happened was after college, I was down in Florida and was doing some snook fishing down in the mangroves. Just a little spin trip, chucking shrimp or whatnot. And I kind of had this aha moment, like, yeah, like this is me. Like I've always loved this, but it kind of got suppressed a little bit, just through high school and sports and whatnot. And then I got back into fishing. I went down to Key West and I did a live bait, kind of spin trip for permit with Captain Jared Sear, catching permit, which was fun down in Key West. And we were waiting for the tide to kind of switch out. And he had a bunch of fly rods in his rod rack on the boat. And I said, hey, man, I know we're just kind of waiting for the tide to switch over here. I mean, do you mind if I just grab a fly rod, kind of mess around? I've seen some people doing this, and I think this could kind of be me. And of course, he was like, sure, and I picked up the rod, and it was amazing because like after just one, I think I couldn't even throw it more than 10 feet, but after some pointers from him, and I kind of messed around a little bit, and I was like, man, I think this is really going to be me from now on. So I came back from that and went back home, and I bought just like a basic fly rod and reel, and started practicing on the pond, and went to the local fly shop, got a couple casting lessons, and just practiced, and then after that I just kind of went full blown into it, and started really, trying to. I was reading a lot, going down to the Keys, doing guided trips. That's when connected me with Derek Rust, who's been obviously one of my best friends and is a phenomenal guide to fish with, and super into fly fishing. And luckily, throughout the years, I've been able to fish with some of the best guides all up and down the Keys. Key Largo to Key West, top notch people. And really, my progression as an angler I fish some of the tournaments now, the fly tournaments. Really, my progression as an angler, I really owe all to them. I mean, yeah, there's a component to where, I got to cast and, practice and be proficient at it, but really, just with the guides I fished with down there, the things that they have taught me, I really, like I said, a lot of my ability and success, I really just goes back to them just because I'm a product of fishing with some of the best in the business. And I'm very thankful and happy, and lucky to have had the opportunity to do so and continue to do so.
That's cool. What about the difference between kind of going down there fishing with different guides? And I know this kind of started with Derek too, but now you're thinking, should I fish in a tournament? Like, talk about the move to kind of fish in a tournament, what that looks like.
Sure. And as you know, I mean, it's definitely a different dynamic. For me, it was kind of multiple factors that kind of went into it. One, of course, at the end of the day, you want to hopefully at least have kind of a skill set to where you feel proficient enough to, go out there and, feel comfortable competing and whatnot. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a competition, right? But for me, some of the other driving factors, it was really more. I'm a big history guy. Anything I do, that was always my favorite subject in high school. History. Anything I do, I love learning about the history of it. And for me, the history of saltwater fly fishing, a lot of it, whether it's just the techniques, the people, a lot of it kind of culminated and started with a lot of these fly fishing tournaments that are held in the Keys, some of which, a couple of the tarpon tournaments, the Gold Club, the Don Holly, the Fall Fly, the Bonefish tournament. I mean, these things have been going on since the 60s and 70s. So there's a lot of really just history, tradition and whatnot tied up into these things. And for me, just kind of being a history buff, that was really cool and appealing to me just to be a part of that. Almost that I could kind of help, carry on the legacy, that Steve Huff started back in the 70s, or Sandy Moret or Ted Williams or any of these guys. A lot of the history of fly fishing, at least in saltwater, can be traced to and from these tournaments. So to me, that was appealing just to have the opportunity to be a part of that. And then another part of it too was kind of the social or the community aspect of it too, because you get to really meet some phenomenal anglers and some phenomenal guides. And it's cool. It's kind of like its own little network and ecosystem within, fly fishing. And that was really neat for me too, just because, as you know, salt as fly fishing, especially in saltwater, is still pretty niche as far as, a lot of people maybe they kind of know it, but they don't really know it. And what was cool for me, at least, for during these tournaments, is you have whatever 10, 15, 25 guides who all just, they totally get it. Everyone's there for the same reason. They're passionate about the fish, they're passionate about the fishery, the sport, and everybody gets it. I always, it's funny, I try to take pictures and videos of, fly fishing for bonefish or tarpon just to serve as almost an educational component just to show people. Because, I take a week of vacation, right? I go down to the Keys and I fish for tarpon, right? And I'll be talking to people just, at work, the water cooler, whatever. And they're like, what'd you do all week? Oh, I was down in the Keys fly fishing for tarpon. And, you just get a blank stare, just people have no idea what that means. And they never will truly until you do it. But, things like that kind of help. But it's cool to be around people who are just, they get it. They're on top of it. They get it. They love it as much as you do. And that sense of community is really neat. And then the last part for me, like I said, with the competition and whatnot, it's kind of cool. And it's a little bit maybe extra adrenaline rush, gives you a little bit extra, game face or whatnot. It's like I tell people, it's like, well, a filet mignon by itself is awesome, but, you put a little crab on it, Oscar style. That's kind of what the tournament does, just a little bit extra, kind of kick, which is kind of cool. So those are kind of the reasons why I was kind of gravitated to and still love to fish in a couple of the tarpon and the bonefish tournaments every year.
What about if you were to think about it right now and think, if I hadn't have graduated to fishing in the tournaments, how do you think you would have progressed as an angler to this point? Do you think it would be the same or different, or what do
Not
you
at all.
think?
I don't think I would have been. I don't think without the element of tournament fishing, I do not think I would be in the same spot I am today as an angler. The reason for that is obviously, I mean, it pushes you. It really does. It's kind of like, well, yeah, you can work out by yourself and still get great results, but eight, nine times out of 10, if you have, whether it's a group of people or a trainer, it kind of serves as an extra kind of benchmark or accountability measure, whatever you want to call it. It kind of helps, it kind of shows you kind of what the benchmark is as far as, like I said, because in these tournaments, you really do get some of the best, in my opinion, the best, people out there fishing for these things. And it really makes you step your game up and kind of serves as almost kind of like a benchmark as, okay, that's kind of where I want to be, or that's, and it really drives you and it pushes you. And for me, that was another reason why I went to the Seychelles in the first place, because I knew I'd have the opportunity to get in front of a lot of fish, have a lot of bent rod, practice fighting, all that good stuff, seeing the fish. So to me, that was just the tournament component itself was another one of the small reasons why I went to the Seychelles, because I knew it would make me better for that. So for me, at least in my opinion and experience, the tournament angle has absolutely continued to push me, drive me, motivate me, and continue to make me a better angler. And that's why I go out and fish with different guides, because I want to learn different things. And just to me, it's just I still think I have so much runway ahead of me in this sport, and I'm just so stoked with where I'm at and where I continue to, learn just one or two small things, from different people. And I figure if just over time, if I can learn one or two things here and there, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, it could be pretty awesome, But for me, yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, the tournaments definitely really motivate you to, continue to go out and cast and practice and get better and, try different things and, fish with different people. And absolutely. So for me, like I said, I'd still be, even without the tournaments, if I never did it, I'd still be angling. I'd still be having a fun time. But there's no doubt, in my opinion, that those fishing those things, participating in them, has absolutely made me a better angler.
Yeah. Oh, well, there I don't think that you could, well, I don't know. I guess you could fish in some tournaments and just kind of do it once or twice and just kind of be like, well, that's not for me. And
Sure.
that's fine. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not, but I don't know. I would see a lot of my anglers come across the bow and I'm like, man, this guy, he could do some good in a tournament. And for whatever reason, they just didn't have any interest in it, and I wouldn't push it too hard, but there was always a question of like why? Why would I wanna do that? Like, I only get so much time off a year, and I wanna enjoy it, and that seems like, you know, that seems kinda like my job's super competitive. Like,
Sure.
I'm in this super competitive field, and when I come out here, we just have a good time. I'm like, "That's cool, man, whatever, that's fine." But if it's somebody that is like, I wanna get as good as I can, as fast as I can. I don't know that there's a better way than getting in those tournaments because, man, it's a totally different deal. It is totally a different deal. There's no time to sit there and watch the sun come up and admire it and think about it. I mean, you're 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 going hard, and I don't know, for those people that kind of are on the fence, I would say that, you know what, even if you didn't come away from fishing the tournaments and say, that's how I want to fish. Every time I go fishing, I want to be in a tournament situation. There are those anglers too. They love the tournaments like so much that's fun to them. But then there are other people that kind of like, I just want to get better. Well, fish a few tournaments and you're going to get a lot better really fast, especially if you're with a really experienced tournament guide. You're just going to learn the tricks that make the difference between catching the fish and not catching the fish. And I don't know, it's cool. It was very beneficial for me as a guide to get into those tournaments and compete against those same people that you're talking about. And at that point, you're competing. You just move to the pros. Like that's you go up to Isla Mirada and enter one of those tarpon tournaments. You are now competing with the best of the best. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's a phenomenal opportunity. I get it's definitely not for everybody. I'm not. That's only about half of my fishing. I still love going out and relaxing and fishing for fun, and whatnot too. But that's definitely something I always do look forward to. It makes you step your game up a little bit, and I don't know. Like I said, I would, like you said, I would definitely encourage people to give it a shot and just you'd be amazed at what could happen. And it's been super beneficial for me and something I definitely, look forward to every year and continuing to do for sure.
Cool, man. So with this Seychelles trip over and done with, do you have another one that you're planning? Do you have another place in mind that you'd like to go, or are you kind of at home for a little bit?
Oh, no, no, I'm always looking ahead to what's next. So, what's next for me on the docket, I really enjoyed, for me, just the opportunity to go out and experience a different part of the world, different fishery, different culture, whatnot. So for me, I think my next trip is I'm actually gonna head down to, South America, to Guyana, and I'm gonna fly fish for, arapaima.
Oh man, that's my soft spot of my heart. That's my dream fish. That's the one that if I could go for one fish right now, I think. I mean, when people ask me that, they're like, "Well, if you could fish for one fish, what would it be?" I'm like, "Man, I think it might be an arapaima, because those things are so badass. They are like a laid up tarpon, but they're 12 feet long and just I just can't even imagine. It just seems like that could be the ultimate game fish, you
I
know?
think so, and that's definitely what attracted, me to it, is everything you just said, and then again, the opportunity just to spend some time, talking about just, the trip as a whole, the environment as a whole, kinda in the Amazon, down there. To me, I've always wanted to visit that part of the world, and, if you could, you know, Amazon, you had me at Amazon, but if you add Arapaima, wow, now I'm really in, So,
Yeah. Well,
hoping to get down there next spring, so.
when you start planning that trip, we need to do another one of these with somebody that's been, because I understand that there's some real, I don't know, maybe it's urban legends about how tough these fish are, and how you have to soup up the tackle and then maybe even make your own tackle to handle some of these things. And I don't know. I want to talk to some people about it, because that fish is so cool. And there in the Tennessee Aquarium where my parents live, used to take the kids into the Tennessee Aquarium, and there would be a tank, and it was an Amazon tank, and they had two, no, they just had one arapaima in there, and this thing was so big, and I just and sometimes it would kind of lay on the surface, and I
Sure.
would just I would just walk straight to that thing and just stare at that fish for an hour until my family would catch up with me. And they're like, "Don't you want to see over here?" No. No, I want to see right. I want this one. This is what is interesting. But that fish just looks so cool. That that's something. All right, so that's cool, man. So French Guiana for the arapaima. You're going to be making your own fly lines very soon, I think. That's what I heard. Break fly lines.
That's right. That's another thing I like to, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and whatnot, so I always like to dabble, and I love to make things or play with, my hands or whatnot, tie flies, create things, build things. So that's another, definitely, something that's in the work too. I have some pretty unique ideas. I'm sure, some of our mutual associates may have shared with you. So absolutely.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Well, if anybody wants to kind of follow you along on your fishing journey, are you active on social media? Can people follow you or check you out, or
Yeah,
what?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Definitely Twitter and Instagram. I got the same handle for both. K, and then my last name Gemas, Gemas 65 is where you can find me. So absolutely.
What's the significance of 65?
That was back to the glory days, man. High school football. I played center and I was number 65. So that's where that comes into play.
That's cool. Sometimes if I have to pick a number or something like that, I go with 38, because I was a 138 pounder in high school wrestling. So sometimes I'll pick 38 as my number, but it's not in my email address. So you're
Oh yeah,
taking it a step further.
No, yeah, I'm one upping you there.
Yeah. All right. Cool, man. All right. Well, look, follow Kyle. Check him out. I'm sure you post some stuff on the Seychelles there on your Instagram. And if not, then you can follow him in preparation for the arapaima that might be.
Yep,
in the
it's coming,
forecast.
man. Like I
Might
said,
be
it'll
in the
be
future.
completely opposite of what I just did, but can't wait.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, thanks for telling us this story. I appreciate it, man. And we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, Tom. Thank you, buddy.
All right. See ya.